Hello, my friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family. Well, guys, we have a meteor that was reported over Florida and landed in Cuba after causing a loud explosion. So these are interesting times that we have going on right here. So this meteorite has reportedly struck a small town in the western part of Cuba, with loud explosions heard in the vicinity where the meteorite landed. A CNN reporter said the meteorite landed on a home in Vinales, Pinar del Rio. The meteorite did not cause any injuries, but you see some leftover fragments of it. The National Weather Service office out of Key West, Florida, confirmed that it received reports from residents of the Florida Keys who witnessed a meteor in the sky. And a meteorite is described as a small piece of rock from outer space that enters the Earth's atmosphere and hits the ground. Rocks from outer space, otherwise known as meteors, enter the Earth's atmosphere frequently, but most burn up in the atmosphere before landing. It's unknown exactly how large this meteorite was. So an interesting story. And remember, Cuba just got hit with a EF4 tornado, which is pretty interesting, especially for this time of year. So they are getting kind of hammered. What is up with that? What is up with that? And this right here is on AccuWeather. There are some videos for you to look at. None showing it while in flight, but just basically showing the smoke trail that left. And you can actually see it on radar. Pretty interesting stuff. And so this got me thinking about, the most famous thing probably in the Western mind that's going to fall out of the sky at some point in time, if biblical prophecy is actually going to be accurate. And so Revelation 8, let's start with 10. Then the third angel sounded its trumpet, and a great star burning like a torch fell from heaven and landed on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. And the name of that star is Wormwood. A third of the waters turned bitter like wormwood oil, and many people died from the bitter waters. Then the fourth angel sounded the trumpet, and a third of the sun, the moon, and the stars were struck. A third of the stars were darkened, and a third of the day was without light, and a third of the night as well. And so, in the Bible, many things are symbolic. Many things have multiple layers of meaning. But I'm still haunted, and I can't remember the source of a prophecy I saw years ago that talked about basically three meteorites or comets, coming to Earth and hitting. And I clearly remember one of them was going to hit basically off the east coast of the United States, and specifically somewhere down around off the coast of Florida and or the Caribbean. And so this one really got me thinking about that. And I forget which prophet it was. I haven't been able to find it. There are so many people that have made these type of, or had these type of visions and seen it. And many of you guys have shared it with me too. When we've had different events, you've said, I've seen that. And I don't know, I'm kind of haunted by that myself. And I did have one dream/vision in which I saw the sky filled with so many objects that there was no place to run, no place to hide. I don't know if it was like an alien invasion or if it was basically just an amazing meteorite shower in which they were everywhere. So there's a gentleman I've been talking to for months now, and he feels very, very legit, and he's gotten messages that he really wants me to share with you guys. And so he's talking about, we've talked for a lot of texts and a lot of emails, and we've talked on the phone for a long period of time in the past as well. And basically, what I get is that it's very similar to what we see when we look closely at Genesis. And so if you guys are familiar with Corey Good, he's talked about these ancient builder races. And what they do is they basically seed life throughout the universe. They're very, very high level benevolent beings. And what they do is they just go around terraforming planets, making planets habitable, and then putting life on planets, and then letting life basically go ahead and evolve on its own. They don't interfere with life in the planets, typically. And so that really got me thinking about these ancient builder races, and we can find evidence of that if we start really looking deep in all the legends across the world and in many other areas as well. And then there's these other beings that have come along and apparently hijacked the long-term evolutionary process that these builder races put into motion. And beings such as the ones that we call the Annunaki, those from who came down from the heavens to Earth. And if we look at the Anunnaki Sumerian legends, which are older, and they definitely are pre-biblical by as much as 1 or 2 millenniums, so way older than the Bible legends. According to them, basically, there was something here that was evolving that was humanoid, and it was tinkered with by these beings in order to make a perfect slave race. And so, many of you guys out there believe in that, and believe in that fully, and many of you guys don't believe in that at all. There is evidence of genetic tampering with humankind. I mean, just the fact that 97% of our DNA is kind of cut off. It's not activated. And when we look at these legends and, we look deep into them, and all over the world, like the Chinese legends, and the Chinese, some of the Chinese and Taoist legends, mankind at one time lived great periods of great lengths of time, and was, basically just like the gods themselves, before the gods basically changed mankind, and kind of caused the fall of mankind when you look at it. And so they did it through genetic manipulation, enabling us to communicate with them and take orders, but also disengaging some of our higher perceptive abilities, such as, the full functioning of the third eye. And then, of course, we see, the fluoridation of the water, we see 5G, we see the cell towers, we see everything around us that has been basically done to keep us in a very, very limited, lower vibrational frequency. And so that feels like that is still going on. And there's so much evidence when you look all around the globe that there were some sort of beings here at one point. Maybe they're still here, and that they had advanced technology, and they actually played with humans and changed humans. And these beings, there's all sorts of statues, there's all sorts of legends, and people try to emulate them and make their heads apparently look like these beings' large heads. And I was sharing one of the things that I have gotten in the past, from some research, and I'm not sure if I ever shared it with you guys before, but I was sharing it with a friend, talking about, why is the Skull and Bones Society the Skull and Bones Society? What does that have to do with anything? Well, they were different. The ones from the stars and their direct offspring were different than us. And one of the things that was different was their skull and also their bones. And so what the Skull and Bones is referencing is these beings who came from the stars and who basically altered humanity, and that they are holders of this secret knowledge, of the fact that, this is how humanity was altered, and also that they are of that lineage themselves. And so this is where your Illuminati, Cabal, deep state really comes from, is the offspring of these beings, and they're still giving homage to their genetic differences, such as the skull and the bones. And as we were talking about Homo capensis before, and I've done videos on this as well, we have a lot of these skulls. There's tons of these skulls that we see like this. Most definitely, there were beings that were different than us, different than what we are now. But there's so much evidence to this fact. When you look at the Bible too, there's 2 creation stories in there, right? Genesis 1 over here, and over in Genesis 2 over here. And there's differences. Genesis 1, God created humans after he created everything else. Genesis 2, God created humans before he created everything else. Back to Genesis 1, God created man and woman at the same time. And then over into the second creation story, God created man first. After that, he created animals. Then he created woman. And over here, back to number 1, God just spoke, and from his words, everything came into existence. Over here, God had to work in order to create, form human beings from dust, breathe life into them, get a rib from man to create woman. Over here, number 1, after creation, God looked at all he had done and was greatly pleased and happy. Number 2, God banished the first couple from the Garden of Eden in his anger at their disobedience. Disobedient slaves that were created for a purpose, to basically work the land, because the gods didn't want to work the land anymore. They didn't want to do these manual jobs themselves. So when you look at that, that's pretty interesting. And there's a lot of these type of things when you really go into the Bible and say, if you look at the book of Kings and the book of Judges, they cover a lot of the same time frames, but they'll give you differences, completely different accounts of the same story. And so for those of you that studied in depth, there's the Elohist and there's the Yahwist versions, showing clearly that there were 2 different scribes that had totally different takes and actually call God by different names. Either El for Elohim or Yahwist, which was for Yahweh, Yod-Heh-Voh-Heh. Because, again, they never put the vowels in. It was consonants only. It was up to the scribe to put the vowels in the right place. And, of course, they didn't write the vowels down. So it was only when speaking that they would use their judgment to put the right vowels in the right place. And so it's all very fascinating when you look at it. And there's 2 different diets that you're given in Genesis. The first one is the fruit-based diet, Genesis 1:29. And God said, "Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree, in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat." Fruit, right? And the herbs will be your medicine is the other part of that, as again we see here. And then in Genesis 9:2-3, after the flood, after the fall, every living creature of the earth and every bird of the sky will be terrified of you. Everything that creeps on the ground and all the fish of the sea are under your authority. You may eat any moving thing that lives. As I have given you the green plants, I now give you everything. So it's really interesting how things change so much. And perhaps that change is due to who the God is that's currently speaking. And perhaps it's not the original God, quote unquote. It might be more something like what we're seeing here, which are beings that were seen all around the globe. Mesoamerica, in Sumeria, Babylon, you name it. These beings were well known. They were serpentine and also kind of bird-like at the same time, and definitely had a taste for blood. And when we look at many of the cultures around the world, blood sacrifices were done to them in their honor, done for them in their honor. And so we see that then man's diet changes, because there's a new ruler on the earth, and it's not the same as the original ruler. So this is something that is really interesting and curious to look into. And so there's many times and many places throughout the Bible where there's obvious difficulties, and so there's been official stories that have been adopted, official ways of interpretation, official theological deductions, that have been handed down. But if you look close, you can see that there really does appear to be different entities in it, and giving very, very different instructions. Christ said, "You heard an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth." But I tell you, again, turn the other cheek. If somebody wants your cloak, give them your tunic too. Completely different than the Old Testament, in most of the Old Testament, besides the oldest parts, of Genesis here. And it's the same thing in many other places. And then when the Pharisees and the Sadducees, who were the ruling religious authorities in that day, when they were questioning Christ, and he said to them, "You're not of God, you're of your father, the devil, Satan, the evil one." And these beings is who he's talking about, and the ones that have been liars since the beginning. So just very interesting, and there's so much you have to look in deep to. And I think far too many people just simply go and listen to their pastors and don't think for themselves. They don't really go in there and think for themselves and start to compare verse to verse and start to go into some of the other books that are in existence, such as the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, so many other ones. Start studying all the different works around the globe to get a clearer picture of what's going on, because these cultures, they all have legends of these beings, and these beings tend to be very, very carnivore, and they demand blood sacrifice. And so, going back to the skull and bones, their offspring, their children, are still ruling over us to this day. So it's very, very interesting indeed. And so going back to the main story that we started with about the meteor coming down, and then we went into Wormwood. Well, the gentleman I've been talking to, he basically says that the way he has gotten it, and I'm just sharing his story with you guys because he wants me to, because he feels it's very, very important. And he really wants to share it with you. It's the fact that the original creator is basically leveling judgment on the planet now because of the fact of how the condition of the planet, the fact that we are missing the bigger picture. And so these symbols that we have been seeing in many different places, the cross and the circle, are a sign of judgment that's coming. And this judgment's going to come primarily in the form of 3 large meteors that are going to hit and cause massive destruction. And so one of them would be what we would interpret as Wormwood. And these are the symbols and the signs that are now being seen all over of it coming. And even the sun halos are a sign of this judgment that's coming. And it's been put in our artwork. As you see Christ here in the arms of the Mother Mary, or the Madonna. You see the sign of the cross. You also see the star over here that Christ is looking to and pointing to with his 2 fingers and saying it's coming. The star that's going to be tossed to the earth. So we see it, and it's in so many different icons, as we see Christ here holding the earth with the cross. Of course, the globe, the circle, and then the cross, as he sits apparently on his Father's shoulder, and he's got his halo about him. So that is the message. And the most important thing is us getting right with our Maker. However you want to view it, whether you want to call it God, Source, Prime Creators, Holy Spirit, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It's all about us getting back to a different way of living, to stop abusing the planet. One of the things that he says is one of the greatest problems is basically no respect for life, as we're seeing with the abortions, these last late term, even day before birth abortions, and just the fact that we're so out of balance and lack of respect and taking care of the feminine in the world. Because you could see how everything has been so testosterone driven in this world. And there's been a lack of balance and a lack of respect for the divine feminine as well. And when you look at it, the cross, in its truest sense also, an equilateral cross means balance. And we don't have balance. We haven't had balance. And we have no respect for the earth. Well, those in charge have no respect for the earth, and they're trying to kill it. They're trying to pollute it. They're trying to just destroy it. And so, while there is a God, a source, a single source of all, there are also what we have called gods, which are not gods at all, just different beings. Different beings with different agendas. And many of these agendas are not really benevolent, not only to humans, but to life in general. And so the ancient ones, the ones that are the creators, the ones that go about doing this terraforming and spreading life throughout the universe, are basically making their rounds back around, and their power and technology, and it's not even really technology, because it's more of a spiritual power, are so far ahead and so far advanced that there's a great reset coming, according to what he is sharing. And again, this is what he is sharing in his interpretation. Everybody needs to go in and basically decide for yourself. So there's a great cleansing that's coming. And really, the most important thing is where we are spiritually, and how we treat each other, and how we treat the planet. And if we just operate out of love and compassion and change our ways, pick each other up, show that we care about each other, show that we care about the planet, show that we truly love and are capable of love and compassion, then perhaps the judgment won't come as severely as it's coming. And perhaps more lives will be spared, and perhaps the transition into what we're hoping and we know will eventually become a golden era once again upon the planet will be much smoother. And we will usurp the dark evil powers that have been on this planet and seal them out of this realm of existence, where they can no longer taint it and bring nothing but destruction and death, disease, and warfare. No more. So that's the main thing we could do right now, is again holding love in our hearts, compassion, and staying as high a frequency and as high a frequency as we possibly can stay. For it truly is a spiritual war that we see going on. And we're seeing things happening all the time that are showing us this. The signs are everywhere. So let us always act out of peace, love, compassion, and tolerance. So my friends, as always, thumbs up, support the channel. Please do subscribe, click the bell, get all notifications, share with as many as possible. And may we all always exemplify that divine love, which we know we can do, and which is what was originally intended. God bless, my friends. Namaste.